Live pictures of San Francisco on a foggy and rainy afternoon, 2 days before California's gubernatorial debate. The two leading candidates in California's governor's race are Republicans. This is a state that Kamala Harris won by 20 points. The Atlantic headlines, California's Blue Armageddon, writing one of the most liberal states in the country can't find a Democrat to lead it. For example, just one problem for Democrats, Tom Steyer is running the most expensive campaign in America. He's reportedly spent $130 million in his bid to be California's governor. Steyer spent over $200 million of his fortune in 2020 to run for president, got nowhere. So $2.4 billion, he has more to spend, although his ROI is somewhat questionable. For those keeping score, he is at 14% in the polls. With us now, Joe Garofoli, senior political writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, Dean Phillips, former congressman and 2024 presidential candidate. Joe, I want to start with you here, just with where the polling is on this. It is a jungle primary. We'll explain this to our viewers often, but it means the top two vote getters, regardless of the political party, go on to the general election. Right now, it is two Republicans, Steve Hilton, Chad Bianco, 1 and 2, after Eric Swalwell dropped out. Have we seen the polls stabilize yet, or is there more movement to come?
I think there's more movement to come, and the person who is moving is one of the least likely Democrats, and that's former Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra. He spiked in the recent polls. He's now running third in the jungle primary poll, as you put it. By the way, Steyer's at 13%. You gave him an extra point.
Oh, well, okay. This was the Emerson College polling, so I think there's a couple of different things going on. 13% at $130 million. I'm doing the math here. $10 million a point. Dean Phillips, that's not even the amount of money you spent in New Hampshire.
Well,
sorry,
first of all,
I couldn't
guys,
resist.
I have to say, I'm used to it, and I hope you saw I smiled. I'm in Los Angeles right now, guys. This is a terribly consequential primary forthcoming. I'm astounded how few people have it on their radar screens, astounded that 7 Democrats, now it's 6, Betty Yee dropped out, I think, today, 7 Democrats still in the race, which, of course, creates not an unlikely scenario in which 2 Republicans could ascend to the general election. And we're going to have about 25, maybe 30% of the electorate turnout for such a consequential election. It's quite remarkable that in a state with such problems, a Democratic Party that has such an opportunity would be in this position to begin with. I have to say one name that is being talked about more regularly is Matt Mahan, the mayor of San Jose, a business-minded former teacher, done a good job as mayor, along with Daniel Lurie in San Francisco. There is an opportunity here for Californians to elevate a next-generation governor, and then along with Josh Friday for lieutenant governor, a couple young, impressive next-generation Democrats that would really move the needle. Whether that happens,
almost sounds like an
is gonna be
endorsement.
another story.
Doesn't often get here. Joe, help us understand
I'm happy to endorse. I'm happy to endorse Matt Mahan. I think he'd be the right person for California.
All right, fair enough. Joe, help us understand how a Democratic Party that is a machine in California that has controlled that state with such an iron grip is apparently so out of control right now of their own people.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things going on here, Leland, and Matt Mahan. People may be talking about him, but he's at 5% in the polls. First of all, I think very few people. There's still maybe a third of the electorate is undecided, and there are twice as many Democrats as there are Republicans in California. So, if one Republican or if one Democrat gets into the top 2, they will likely win, just for the mere fact that. The numbers, and the fact that the president is loathed by 2/3 of the voters here. And Steve Hilton, who's the leading vote getter here, has just been endorsed by President Trump. So he had a short-term win, but a long-term pain on that one. But I think a lot of the energy of the race was sucked out by Proposition 50, which was the gerrymandered map that was approved by California voters last November. So much energy went into that. And there was a good turnout, and since then, people are kind of like, exhausted by politics. exhausted by, and none of these Democrats are really lighting the world on fire. That nobody is.
No, it's a great point. There's not a
anyone.
lot of excitement about anybody. There's also
No.
sort of negative excitement about a woman named Katie Porter, who was in Congress and was known for some of her, shall we say, more unfortunate, undignified behavior. Here's a little bit of it.
What do you say to the 40% of California voters who you'll need in order to win, who voted for Trump?
How would I need them in order to win, ma'am?
Well, unless you think you're going to get 60% of the vote.
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask. And the state could lose. Get out of my shot.
I wanted to tell you that that's actually incorrect.
Okay. You also were in my shot before that.
Dean, how much do we look at this primary as a referendum by California on the Democratic progressive utopia? 16 years of Democratic rule, everything in California should be running the way Democrats want it to be running. Can we look at it that way?
Well, it wasn't long ago, Leland, in which in the United States, the political parties had a lot more sway. The old Democratic Party probably never would have had 7 candidates in the race at this point. You know, what I find interesting, though, about California right now, unlike my home state of Minnesota, Minneapolis, New York City, so many other urban bastions around the country, it just does not seem to have that dynamic of the far left versus the more moderate Democrats that we're seeing in so many other places. What's really astounding, and I alluded to this earlier, is just how it seems barely on the radar screen. People starting to talk about it a little bit, but considering the consequences, it's really remarkable how in this day and age, with politics being a form of entertainment and angertainment, that it really has not risen, at least amongst the people I'm talking to, and that's a pretty wide swath. So it's going to be quite a remarkable outcome. And can I say one more thing, Leland? I think it's also remarkable that the leader in the polls right now, Steve Hilton, became a U.S. citizen in 2021. You know, was an aide to the former prime minister.
We had Arnold Schwarzenegger out there. Yeah, so think about it this way. I look at the Democratic primary right now in California as the far left versus the farther left, thinking what Tom Steyer said about ICE. Dean Phillips, Joe, thank you very much. Well, you will be paying attention to the debate on Wednesday night. Race for the California governor begins Wednesday night, 8 Central on NewsNation. Chris Steyerwalt and I will be live in San Francisco. The debate kicks off at 10 p.m. Eastern. Special coverage all night. As Phillips said, California is going to tell us a lot about the direction of America.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.